Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Get Good at OpenRCT2 Tycoon 2. In this episode I will show you how to build a Morgan Hypercoaster. Now if you don't know who Morgan is a company that used to build really big roller coasters. They also built some smaller ones, but they were mostly known for their big hypercoasters. Hypercoaster, name already says it. These roller coasters were typically huge. And you can also build them in this game. They even have their own coaster type, which is the Hypercoaster. Now, what are some typical elements of these coasters? Now, of course, they typically have a really high lift hill. So this one goes up to 50 meters. Well, the real ones, they even go higher. But I think in Rollercoaster Tycoon 2, 50 meters is a nice maximum height. Because if you go much higher, then your track will look like a series of triangles. And that's probably something you'll want to avoid in this game. Now, the layouts for these coasters are typically really big. And yeah, this is actually one of my smaller ones in an L shape. So I think this one covers around 70 tiles in length here. So yeah, you're going to need quite some space to build one of these. Now I also built one in my mega park and one in a group park, and they were both even longer than this one. So here you can see the one from my mega park. It's bigger than the previous one. This one covers almost 100 tiles. Again, station here, then a big lift hill. I don't know how high this one is. This one's also around 50 meters. So yeah, the layout of this coaster is quite simple. So it's just a series of hills, some twisty track here, but nothing too crazy. Mid-course brake run, it's something you will also often see on these coasters. And then just some simple twists, and usually at the end of the track there's a series of bunny hills. I don't think I really demonstrate that very properly here, but usually near the end of the run you will see several bunny hills right next to the original drops of the track. So here you can see another version that I once made. So here's a big station, then the lift hill, then a series of drops. Here there's a turnaround, then here there's the block brake section. After that several simple hops right next to the original, right next to the lift hill, and then here finally there's sort of a turnaround with the final brakes back into the station. Anyway, now that we've seen these examples, I will just quickly show you how to make one of these yourself. Alright, I'm starting off with a blank map here. I made it 100 tiles by 100 tiles. I don't think I will need all of it. It's usually best to build these in an L shape, just so you don't use all of the map. If you plan on building these in a larger park, well, obviously you'll have to account for these quite early on. You'll need to save some space, because if you've already built stuff in your park, then it's really difficult to fit one of these in. So to start off, let's just start building one here. Now this design that's already in the game, don't use it. I think it doesn't look particularly like a real hypercoaster. So let's just start off with the station. I think I will build the station in this direction so we can turn around, and that means the coaster will use a little bit less space. It will still be big, but there's no way around that. Okay, let's just. I always like to just start the station above ground. It's something I do for all my coasters. It also makes it easier to fit a station around it and a path under it, but it always also draws the supports. So in general it's a good idea to always have the station off the ground. Now you'll want quite a long station. I believe every car takes around 1 tile. And usually these hypercoasters, I believe they all have 6 cars, the real ones at least. Now if you want to look for inspiration for any real existing Morgan hypercoasters, YouTube is always a good source. RCDB.com is a good website where you can find out which coasters are actually Morgan hypercoasters. They typically have names like Steel Eel, Steel Dragon, stuff like that. Anyway, let's do a turnaround here. And then it's simply a matter of building the lift hill. Now, like I said, I usually go up to 50 meters or something. I generally don't go much higher, because in Rollercoaster Tycoon 2 the trains are quite heavy and they don't lose speed very quickly. So if you make it very high, yeah, then later on in the track your trains will still be going really fast. And yeah, of course that may be solvable with a block break section somewhere in the track. But yeah, I generally just like to go up to 50 meters. 60 probably could also still work. But yeah, for this tutorial let's now stick to 50 meters. So then we go down. Now, for these really high speed sections, like the first drop, you'll want to use these steep to horizontal transitions. If you use these, it's also possible, but it will look a little bit more janky. You could also choose to go for a tunnel here at the bottom. It's what I also use quite often in my parks. But for now, let's just use normal track here. Then we just go upwards again. Now this map is 100 by 100, I believe. And we're already getting quite far into that just with the lift hill and the first drop. Anyway, since we're at 51 meters here, we'll probably want to go a bit lower than that, 37.5. So that's about yeah, 13.5 meters difference. So that means the train will still have some speed here. You can always use the simulate mode. I think I will give it 6 trains instead of 7. Now, simulation mode, a really useful tool in my opinion. So we can just watch it go up the lift hill here. It will take quite some time to reach that, but I sped it up a little bit. And here at the bottom it will go over 100 kilometers per hour. Now it will still have quite some speed here, so that's good. So let's just do another drop here. Now here I think we'll run out of space. So 37.5. I will go a little bit lower, like 31.5. Now for the turnaround sections, I think it's usually better to do that at the top of a hill. You could also do a turnaround at the bottom, but you'll probably would have to use very wide turns just to make it a little bit comfortable. What I like to do is just make a hill like this and to turn around. Just make a curve like this. And then you can just continue on. Now the first few hills are typically just very simple hills. Not much weird about them. So yeah, I will just continue do one more like this. Alright, I think this is already far enough out that we can start thinking about doing a turnaround here. Now, mind you, this is just an example. You don't have to follow this, but this is just an example of what a layout like this could look like. So here I want to have a turnaround. We'll have to think of something that looks good. I think I'll just go with something low to the ground. So let's go up here. But yeah, this you can use your creativity here. Typically there's just a twisty section here in the turnaround for these coasters. Like I said, you can always look up these coasters on YouTube, RCDB, just to find inspiration for a turnaround. But typically these coasters look quite simple. That's also what makes them fun to build, in my opinion. So let's just go diagonal here. The good thing about going diagonal is that you can make really smooth hills. Especially if your coaster is traveling at a high speed. I think these really smooth transitions are acceptable. Okay, I think we've already traversed quite some track here, quite a few hills. So yeah, I think here is a nice spot to make the mid-course brake run of the track. And after the mid-course brake run, I just want to continue parallel to this track and just do a series of bunny hops. Now this turnaround here, it's just something I cooked up quickly. Not really much thought went into it. Now, when you make the brake run, you should make sure that it is as long as the train itself. So I'll make it 6 tiles long. That should be enough. Now, one thing you should be careful of with these coasters is that they cannot do banked sloped turns. So you should always be a little bit careful with lateral G-forces. Now, I actually put block brakes on this section, so that's why this train stopped simulating. So I will just put it in continuous circuit mode, just so it continues running. Okay, we have 4 block sections now. So one in the station, one here on top of the chain lift. We have the mid-course brake run, and we have then the brake run here at the end, which means we can have 3 trains. But I always run my coasters with 1 train less, just so we don't have we don't want them to wait on the mid-course brake run. I think it's much nicer if they can just keep running without waiting too long for each other. Okay, when you've built your track, there's a few things you could do to make it look more like a real Morgan Hypercoaster. Now, one thing you will typically see on most of these coasters is a lattice structure for the lift hill. And sometimes also for the higher hills after that. And for the lower parts, it's typically just straight columns. So that's easy to do because the game by default just draws straight columns for the supports. Now, the easiest way to do this is simply by just using these support structures and simply build them under the track like this. Now, what I like to do is put 2 of them next to each other and then build the next. And just repeat that pattern for the entire lift hill. Now, in one of the coasters I showed you earlier, I actually made a custom support structure by using these, what are they called? These steel lattice works connected with a lot of wooden post fences from the Wild West set. That's of course also an option. You can make your own supports if you want. But I do remember it taking me many hours to do that. So for this tutorial I'm not going to bore you or myself with doing that. Okay, I could also do this first hill, but for now I'm just going to do this lift hill as an example. So what I usually do after I've done this is look at the places where the default supports still show and simply hide those by moving them under the surface. You should only do this way if they are above land, by the way. Because else if you do this above water, then your track pieces will become invisible sometimes. And that's probably something you'll want to avoid. Okay, now that that's done, I then like to make the support structure look a little bit more sloped, rather than just these being blocks. So what I then usually do is take these wooden post fences and put them on top here. And then we slope them like this. Now there's also multiple ways to do this. I'm just gonna show one way that this can be done. So simply just angle these pieces with the tile inspector. And then you could also put a wooden post fence right behind this. Of course now this piece here is floating. So you could either put some poles to connect it to the back side of the structure here. I don't know, something like this could work. Or you could simply just put another one of these wooden post fences right under this one. And that can also be used to make it look like they're connected again. Now I'm gonna do this for a few more of these supports, not for all of them. But yeah, just to give you an idea of what this would look like. Anyway, like I said, there's multiple ways to do this, but this is one way that I like to do this. Now, for these wooden post fences, you cannot put them as steep as this drop is, but I usually like having at least some wooden post fences right here that are diagonal, which are sloped, I mean, rather than having none of them at all. So usually I do place some wooden post fences here anyway, and just give them a little bit of a slope. I just think it looks better than having none of them here at all. But yeah, it's something you can experiment with. Maybe you can find some track to put behind this. Maybe it looks good with a wooden coaster track behind it where it meets the supports. But yeah, that will be something for you to play around with. Now, I believe one of the bigger of these coasters even has some supports to the side. Yeah, that's also something you can play around with. I believe it's the one in Japan. Of course, there the coasters have to be earthquake proof. So there they just put some of these side supports right next to it, just to help stabilize it in case of an earthquake. But yeah, even if your coaster doesn't have to be earthquake proof, I think this is just a nice way to add some extra supports. You could also do it on this side and have the coaster pass through the supports here on the side. Now, something else you'll sometimes see on these coasters is tunnels. Well, the ones that I saw on some of these real coasters, typically they look very simple. They're often just boxy structures like this. So yeah, this is actually what some of the real tunnels look like. I think it looks really silly, but yeah, you can probably do better than the real ones. Oh yeah, it's almost like a beginner designed those tunnels in Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. Anyway, one thing you could also still decorate is this mid-course brake run. What I like to do is just add some catwalks to it, or just a little platform under it. Put some fences or some railings around it. I also like to add some support structures like this, because the brake run is a part where the coaster may have to come to a stop, and it's quite heavy, so you'll probably want some extra support here rather than just these normal supports. So let's add some extra support structure here. Now, and if you really want to add some detail, you could, for example, also add a catwalk right next to it. I like to use the mini golf for that. So yeah, you can just play around with these mini golf track pieces. I'm just quickly going to copy and paste some of these track pieces here, just to make a simple catwalk. But again, this is just one way to do it. It's something you can play with. Alright, yeah, like I said, this is just one way to do it. It's just a decoration that I like to add. I often also make a little structure around these evacuation chairs, but it's not really a requirement or something. Alright, yeah, I think that's really all there is to know about these Morgan hypercoasters. So yeah, I recommend just looking a few up on RCDB, riding them on YouTube, or maybe even if in your local theme park, if there are any, and if this lockdown situation ends, of course. And yeah, and then you should be able to make your own quite easily. So yeah, just keep the layout simple, don't do anything crazy, be careful with lateral G-forces when you do these unbanked sloped turns, and that should quite easily give you a nice layout. And yeah, don't be afraid to use up quite some space with these, because these coasters tend to be pretty big. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, I hope it's useful for you, and I'll see you again in the next video. See you later.